purpose of the speech today is I'm going to give you a high-level overview of what Speechcraft is all about. And since almost everybody in the room is fairly new to Toastmasters, you'll also glean some things out of it as well. What's extraordinary about this particular club, not only because of its leadership, but because of what we're up to. We are formulating, we're creating, we're chartering a new club. There are 126 clubs in our district alone here in Florida, soon to be 127. Extraordinary, right? Yes. So a quick introduction to Speechcraft, 10 minutes. Speechcraft is an accelerated version of the training that you will get once you are a Toastmaster. So we have a program called Pathways. And the Pathways demonstrates, teaches us a lot of the things that you'll learn in an accelerated version of Speechcraft. And we learn online at a self-paced program, and then we practice it here. Isn't that extraordinary? This safe space where we can get incredible feedback so that my speech can be even better next time. So there's learning, there's practicing, which is what I'm doing now by presenting a speech. We're strengthening our skills. We have 3 absolute brand new to this meeting leaders. They took on a functionary role. They said yes when they had no idea what they're doing. But friends, you can't mess it up because this is how we learn. So we've got leadership skills. There are actually 7 leaders in every single club. There's a president, a vice president of education, vice president of membership, vice president of public relations, a treasurer, a secretary. Sounds like a lot, right? It is. It's an extraordinary network of leaders. We get to learn how to understand feedback. Have you ever been in a position where you needed to give feedback, valuable feedback, and you didn't know how they were going to receive it? Or did somebody try to give you feedback and they went about it all wrong and it just didn't land well? We learn how to not only listen very well, not only how to speak even better, but how to receive and give feedback that can be powerful in how we show up in the world. There's leadership skills by saying yes to the functionary roles and to leadership, and you build confidence. You get up in front of a room full of strangers and sometimes friends and put yourself out there. It's scary, but it's also very empowering. I want to shift gears and talk to you a little bit about my favorite part of the meeting, which is called table topics. It's the impromptu speech. Let me ask you a question. Has anybody asked you a question and you were not prepared for that question, so you don't have an answer ready to go? Yes. The butterflies start swirling around, your mind gets a little bit fuzzy, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to respond. We usually start fidgeting, we start stuttering over our words, trying to fill up things, right? Am I the only one? I'm a mess! An interview, especially if you're a realtor, you're interviewing for that listing, aren't you? You're interviewing for that buyer to say yes to you, aren't you? When you're at a networking meeting and somebody asks you a question and you're not quite prepared, the impromptu speeches called table topics helps you get your mind straight, helps you to have some filler words. That's a great question, Omar. I'm glad that you asked that, right? It helps me be prepared for how to think clearly and then articulate it well. It's my favorite skill set to build. And we're going to experience that in just a few minutes in here. So even though your body's gonna say, no, say yes, give it a try. It's a safe space. You are going to learn through Speechcraft how to create topics that you can select from. And it's going to be things that you're most familiar with, something that you can speak with confidence about. So we're going to have some opportunities to build those skills, how to choose a topic, and how to organize a speech. Most speeches have an introduction, a body, and a strong conclusion, a takeaway, if you will, a call to action sometimes. And it also depends on what kind of speech you're doing. What's the purpose of your speech? Is it to inspire? Is it to inform? Is it to entertain? Or it can be to persuade somebody to your way of thinking. And then finally, the next step in the Speechcraft training is on the introduction of a speaker. An introduction is one of the most important key elements when you stand up here to give your first speech. An introduction sets the speaker up for success. It's a critical component that unfortunately a lot of people don't put enough time and thought into. It should have a quick little introductory, a body, and a conclusion, just like your speech. But very short, poignant, 30 seconds is the aim, maybe no longer than 60 seconds. Let me ask you, when you heard my name pronounced, now you can put a face to a name. When you heard I've published a few books, or my job title, or something else about me, did you feel like you had a little bit more connection with who I am in this world?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You want to formulate your introduction to who your audience is. I may not have mentioned that I'm a mortgage loan officer, a published author, or have a podcast about credit if I weren't surrounded by the majority of people in real estate. Would that be important for an audience of people inside of real estate? I thought so. If I'm standing in front of a group of women at a church, I might talk about my hobbies, how I volunteer, something else that they can connect with me on that level. So do you see the importance of an introduction to match who your audience is? You get to learn how to put that together. In a few more minutes, after table topics and after our evaluation, which I want to set the stage again, please lean in and listen, because I personally invited who I believe is the strongest evaluator in our entire district, and he just happens to be a member of a fellow club that meets in this room a little bit later today. He's a champion and moving forward towards our district conference competition. We brought in the best so you can glean and learn. And why is this important? Because next week, if you are bold enough to accept the invitation, we can have as many as 5 icebreakers. You'll have a guide that will be your evaluator. And in the following week, you will have the training in Speechcraft to do your own evaluation for a fellow Speechcrafter. So in as short as 2 weeks from right now, you could too be doing an evaluation much like what Stephen is doing. It's very powerful. It's very important for our growth. I'll ask this question of you. If you gave a speech and you fumbled and you stood here like this and you didn't look at anybody, or you just looked out over everybody's eyes because you were terrified to make eye contact and everybody said you did great, are we setting you up for success?
No.
Sometimes it's a few things about content, and sometimes it's a few things about delivery. It's usually a few things about both. But we want to be a kind and generous and helpful evaluator in such a positive manner. And you'll get the training to do so. So I'm going to wrap up my introduction to Speechcraft. I'm going to come up in a few more minutes and talk about our next steps to help our Speechcrafters be best prepared for what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks. And I thank you so very much for this time.
I think so too, because we had the honor of having Toastmaster Kristi Nowrouzi stand here and isn't she so influential to all of us? She's trained so many of us how to deliver great speeches. Today she gave us quite a few little nuggets of learning that we can learn from. First, there's 3 of them. I want to start with her hand gestures and her acting. When she gets up here, she doesn't flail her arms around and do just random things at random times. She's very purposeful when she speaks. If she's going to make a point, she'll make a gesture and then return. If she wants to make a big gesture, she'll put her arms out. If she wants to act out what it is that we might be feeling with a no and shrink back, it's purposeful and it's intentional. And this is something that we can add to our own speeches to make sure that we're delivering something purposeful and prepared and look that way on stage. Next was adding that humor and that vocal variation. Adding humor is a great way of drawing in the guests in the room, the people that are listening to you. You want to make sure that with that vocal variation as well, it helps us to make sure that we're engaged. Because how many of you have ever sat in a science class and the speaker talks in the monotone voice and you don't know what's an important point and which one's an unimportant point? Adding that vocal variation draws us in and keeps our attention. Third was eye contact. She was very intentional about making sure that every person got her attention for at least a second so that she could connect with them and build that trust with them. Now, there were two opportunities for improvement, small ones. Given the nature of her speech, there was no clear opening hook, either a statement or a question or a joke right at the beginning to capture your attention in an instant. That's something that we can add to our speeches at the beginning to draw in that audience right away and to get their full attention and make sure there's nothing else distracting around the room. Second was that call to action. She did a great job of telling us where we could be and what we could do in the next couple of weeks. But I would tweak it just a little bit to say, I challenge you to get a speech prepared for next week. I challenge you to do the pathways and learn some ways to provide your own evaluation in 2 weeks. Giving us that little challenge makes it personal for us. Not a group, we could do it at some point, but a specific, I want to tackle this challenge and I want to do it. Again, there was some fantastic things that she brought to us. Again, 3 great things that we can learn from what she did: the hand gestures, the humor, the vocal variation, and eye contact. And then those 2 little opportunities for improvement, that opening hook and that call to action. Kristi, I want to thank you for crafting not only our speeches, but our futures.
Did you see what he did there? Did you see what he did? He pointed out a couple of things that were great takeaways. He didn't give me a summary of my speech. We already heard it directly from the author, right? So he gave a couple of points, gave some opportunities for improvement. Is it anything that I would have been offended about? Was it about me? No. It was about how to improve my skills and my speech. So I feel positive, right? And he did a great service for me. The most extraordinary example of an evaluator. Thank you, Mr. Champion. Our next steps moving forward, speech crafters, should you accept the challenge. Next week, we can have 5 different icebreakers. What's an icebreaker, Ty? I'm so glad you asked. An icebreaker is where you will share for 2 to 3 minutes. It can be about your past, what you're doing right now, what your goals are in the future. It could be absolutely anything you want to share. 2 to 3 minutes. Afterwards, you'll get a 1 minute, so a condensed evaluation, much like what Stephen did, but a little shorter. And in addition to doing your icebreaker, we're going to have introductions for each speaker. So it's going to go fast, rapid fire, 30 to 60 seconds. So Emily, let's say you were introducing Omar. You two would get together in just the next few minutes. You're going to have 2 minutes each to interview each other. You'll take notes, and then next week, when it's Omar's icebreaker, you'll introduce him, you'll shake his hand, he'll do his icebreaker. So everybody then will have 2 opportunities to speak. Does that make sense? Okay. There's some training online involved with the Speechcraft. I'm going to challenge you to get through the first 4 sessions. It should take no more than 45 minutes, and you can break that up however you need to. There's online training that will help you formulate your icebreaker. There's an outline in which you can use to create your icebreaker. And then there's also going to be a guide to evaluate. Although we're not going to be evaluating each other as speech crafters next week, I do want you to review the guide to evaluation so you understand what's being evaluated of your icebreaker. Does that part make sense?
Absolutely.
Are there any questions on this part? Please.
Where is the website to?
I would have to send you an email invitation, and I can do that today as soon as you give me your information.
Is there like a start date that is predetermined by you, or can we start at our own pace?
This is week 1. It's a great question. This is week 1. So if you're agreeing to the 4 weeks, you'll be prepared for your icebreaker, which when you do the training, you'll be prepared.
Yeah.
Part of that.
Thank you.
Carlos, did you have a question?
Yes, I did have a question. I was wondering if each speech has a specific objective, and should that objective be explained to the club before the speaker goes up to speak, so when they give their feedback, they know what the objective was and they could tailor their
Great
feedback?
question. Yes, there's actually an evaluation sheet that matches an icebreaker. Your icebreaker could be on any topic. In future speeches, you might choose to do a persuasive speech or an informative speech, and knowing that will be very important not only for our audience, but also for the evaluators. Okay. If you have any questions, I'll be around afterwards. I want to read